Namaste. As always, it's a great delight to dip into the Mother's prayers, a greater delight to drown into it, and still greater to be completely flooded over by it. So, these prayers are not just, like we take it like a holy book and a prayer and we read like that. But these prayers also show us the light, as the Mother has said, that these prayers are meant for those who want to follow the path. So they are a whole complete path. And what I always feel before the Mother's prayers and meditations, if one wanted to know more about bhakti, then we had Shandil's Bhakti Sutra and Narad Bhakti Sutra. They were the acme. There are many books written on bhakti, bhakti yoga, but these were the ultimate. And then when I read Synthesis of Yoga, the whole book of divine love, it's amazing. There, you see the depths and profundities and wideness of bhakti. But bhakti in all its details, comprehensive bhakti, nowhere one finds as in the Mother's prayers and meditation. So there are people who say we don't have faith and we don't have devotion. What should we do? So one solution is, of course, there are many ways to cultivate bhakti, like thinking of the divine, reading things of the divine, because you slowly begin to fall in love with somebody whom we are, reading, coming in contact with. So coming in contact with is a first effort through which bhakti develops. So taking the divine name, it develops bhakti. That is the power of the divine name. But a very simple way is simply reading her prayers and meditation, contemplating upon it, and trying to live. All the deepest truths are there. And beauty is, Mother doesn't use often names, like we will see in one of the prayers, number of prayers. She is speaking about the supermind, but she is not using the word supermind. She always went beyond all definitions. So today we'll read this prayer, May 19th, 1914. This mental being, which throughout my individual existence had the power to set all my faculties working. The first conquest to be won is this. This what is called as individualizing, where the mind decides, makes the choice, and the rest of the being follows. Even as late as 1949, when we see Sri Aurobindo supramental manifestation, she says before we can talk about the supermind and the transformation, mind should be able to exercise control even over things which are involuntary. So to that extent, the power of mind, because mind is right now the leader, it has to hand over to the supermind. But if the leader is very frail, in our military we have this custom that must have seen in one of these parades, that the parade is put into order, and there is the Subedarji who goes and Subedar major in a platoon, he goes and puts them all in order, and then he says, attention, stand at ease, attention. After they have done, he's seen that they are in order. Then he goes back and reports to the officer. And he turns behind, salutes and says, parade nirakshan ke liye hazir hai Shiman. The parade is ready for inspection. So mind has to prepare the instrument. It's a very important work, because it's difficult for the psychic to come out unless one is blessed and there are previous lives. So the mind, at least, as the Mother says, be reasonable. Forget about psychic. Be reasonable. So here she is saying that in my life throughout, my mental being had the power to set into motion all the activities. And what are these? Deep devotion for thee. The mind could compel the heart to respond with devotion. What it means is that if the heart revolts before the sense of the divine, the mind in man is the leader, mana prana sharira neta. It must tell the heart. It's an ignorant movement. I'll take an example. For example, when things happen in a way that we don't want it to happen. So we straight away jump to conclusion, see, God is not there, or He is so cruel. Why He didn't listen to the prayer, therefore He is not, etc., etc. Number of thoughts. So when people ask me, so sometimes I tell them that instead of this, if you simply tell, hello, whoever is there, make me understand the wisdom behind this. So instead of reacting means I already know why this has happened, why God has done this. Instead of blaming, instead of complaining, we should aspire for the wisdom behind whatever is happening in our life. And then life begins to change slowly by slowly. Because the mind, if it gains the light, even in supramental manifestation, the first thing that will happen is the mind of light, which is freed from ignorance. All the rest follows later. The first place where the light is received is the brain. Thy golden light came down into my brain. The grey rooms of my mind sun-touched became. A bright reply to wisdom's occult plane, a calm illumination and a flame. So this mind is a tremendous power. We should learn to use it. She says in Savitri, Sri Aurobindo says, mind is a mediator divinity. So it is meant to mediate. So she says that already she had mastered it. She has already completed this aspect. So mind could compel the heart that look, only the divine is worth loving, giving yourself completely. So deep devotion for thee, infinite compassion for men. How the mind can, bring compassion. This is a very interesting example. There are plenty of examples. But one of them which I love to recall is, there was a Russian lady in the ashram. So she was into drama and all this. So after last 6 months of her life, she used to call me and just talk to me once a week. One day suddenly she says, I was waiting for you. So what is it? I have made a great discovery I want to share with you. So I didn't know what she wants to share. She says, I have forgiven my husband. I was, okay, good thing you have forgiven your husband. She says, last 30 years she was separated. She says, 30 years I could not forget and forgive. I said, but what inspired you? She says, the Gita. She had read the Gita. But suddenly she remembered that men are driven on a wheel like a fly on the wheel. This yantra rudini. They are caught. She says, I thought he was also bound by his nature. How can I complain about him? And that day her heart got released. That knot got released. Within few days she passed away. It was very beautiful that before passing, she released that dark emotion from the heart. Mind reminded her. So it brought in compassion. He must have struggled. He had his own difficulties of nature. As the mother says, when you fight with your own nature, you develop compassion because then you understand how difficult it is. So she says, infinite compassion for men, ardent aspiration for knowledge. Mind itself tells us I am ignorant and it doesn't require any rocket science. I often say, see, people claim that they know. You don't even know what is going to happen to you the next moment. That is the degree of ignorance in which we live. So it's very good to remember, be humble, that we don't know. And then knowledge comes. So she could have that aspiration for knowledge. Effort for self-perfection. Mind tells us, without self-perfection, life is meaningless actually. What is the option? What is the other choice? Other choice is remain a slave of ignorance and error and suffering. So there is no real choice except striving for self-perfection, how much ever time it takes, how much ever difficult it may be. So she is saying that she could develop all this. But now comes a grand result. After all this, she is saying, all my faculties, like the mind itself, seems to have fallen into a deep sleep and no longer sets anything at all in movement. But after mastery, if we make the mind asleep prematurely, it is dangerous. That's what in Savitri, we see that Savitri hears this. If we throw the mind into a glad divine abyss, how are we going to really arrive at truth and wisdom? So there comes a stage when the mind does fall asleep. There are people who do it prematurely. They say, no, we have to go beyond mind. So In trying to become supramental, they become infra-rational. So no, the mind has its place, and after all the mastery, then she says, I am letting it. In fact, it has gone off to sleep. It has arrived at its peak. Now he is ready to say, I am handing over this entire thing to you. But there is an interim phase he is describing. All the individual faculties slumber, and the consciousness is not yet fully awake in the transcendent state. So all that one has achieved, that entire thing, devotion, aspiration, effort, is this state described in Savitri. Even humility seemed too proud a state. All that she knew, that God was, but did not know who He was. That's all that she knew before finding the soul. And what a description as she comes near. God is hidden in that mystic cave. The mind enters into this trance, this slumber. And she goes, and these golden serpents. It's an amazing description. But the first step is humility, and Sri Aurobindo describes, at first she stepped into a night of God, into the night of God. And there the mind with all its pride goes into sleep. Because suddenly it realizes before a truth too great to know, it's not something ordinary, it's like my mind, its judgments, its opinions, before a truth too great to know. So she says, all these faculties have gone to sleep, but I am not yet awakened in the transcendent state. So this is actually one of the trances that yogis experience. But here it's a waking, living trance. So what is that state? That is, its wakefulness in them is intermittent, and in between there is sleep. It's very difficult. That's why it's called Sushupti. Sushupti means our mind cannot remain awake in the presence of that wonder of wonders. Why? Because mind always needs concept and percept to hold on to. You see, when we go to even Sri Aurobindo's room, there is one grade of people who are only watching here, there, and having questions. Why is this here? Why is that there? What is that? This is one group. Then when you sit, all kinds of concepts are coming. Sometimes it's not good to tell people what you like. There are people who say, oh, you feel so peaceful. Then the person goes, the mind is saying, I must experience peace. Where is that peace? So that effort itself blocks the way. So that's how the mind falls asleep, because mind is no more aware. The mind is no more aware of, there is nothing which it can hold on to. So it falls asleep, because the mind can only understand things through percept and concept. So there is a very interesting experiment people do. We used to do it in Institute of Aviation Medicine, Space Medicine. That 5 days you deprive a person of all senses. Sensory deprivation. So there was a room completely dark. You cannot see anything. No light. And you'll be provided food, because otherwise you'll die. So there is a small window through which food is given, and there is a washroom where you can go. Sensory deprivation. People go crazy. They want to come out within a day, because there is nothing which you can't stay 2-3 days and you go mad, because the mind is completely in a chaos. It doesn't know what to hold on to. So in those domains which are higher, initially the mind goes to sleep. So it falls asleep, then it wakes up in those domains. Something she remembers, but not fully. Something in this being aspires for solitude and absolute silence for a little while. If one needs solitude, feels the need of solitude, it's a wonderful sign. Sign that one is truly marked for spiritual life. There is the urge for solitude. One needs solitude. It may not be given, it's a different thing, but the need and the urge. So as to come out of this unsatisfactory transition, and something else knows that it is thy will that this instrument be consecrated to the service of all, even if this must apparently be harmful to its self-perfecting. How beautiful. Why solitude? She is entering into a state of trance. She is not using the word trance, but she is entering Susupti. So there is a need to withdraw into that more and more. But she knows that if she goes into that state, she will not be able to do the work of, giving that light, love, freedom to all. So she is making a renunciation. She says that even if it is harmful to self perfection, because if she turns towards the many, you are spreading out. That's what Mother and Sri Aurobindo had that great decision to make. Whether they first realize the supermind, then go about, or they carry together. So the decision was spontaneous and they carried all of us together. So this was the state in which she is there, that should I enter into that deep solitude and go into that trance, or should I continue to be engaged with life and work and people, because she knows this is the mission that has been entrusted. She says it will be harmful to self-perfecting. And yet, when somebody asked Jyoti Priya, it's a letter of Jyoti Priya written to Mother and the reply, she asked the Mother, she used to go and give talks and these things. A lot of people tell me, no, in ashram you have to just remain silent, quiet. Now inner silence and quiet is different. Not speaking is not quietude. But people used to say that, no, you don't have to do this. She asked the Mother. She says, don't listen to them. If everybody stays in the ashram and remains like that, who will do my work? And this he has told to a number of people. Who will do my work? Work requires that you step out and interact. Now, it means you delay your self-perfection, but you grow wider because you carry a whole humanity along. Then, wonderful, she says, what should be the state? Something in this being tells thee, O Lord, I know nothing. I am nothing. I can do nothing. I am in the darkness of inconscience. She says nothing because she has now entered that state where the two poles, if you see, it's not darkness of inconscience of that kind, but where the two are serpent touching the tail by its own mouth. The two are together. It's an amazing state where one shift you are in that superconscious sleep, and this shift you are in that inconscient sleep. It's known in Upanishad says one of the forms of samadhi. So she is there, and either ways you are nothing, you can do nothing. And this state, when it comes to her, and something else knows that it is thyself and thus the supreme perfection. She has discovered that supreme even in that state. Somewhere he is there. She cannot sense where is he, but he is there. And therefore the supreme perfection is there waiting to be born. What is going to come out of that? Sometimes we become very anxious, even about one's own progress. That also interferes. Once Sri Aurobindo says, for 6 months I was in that state when I just couldn't do anything. They are states of consciousness through which we have to pass. They are. Once Chotnaranji told me something very interesting. He didn't tell me, but somebody had asked a question and he was telling him. Very beautifully he answered. He said, in normal, ordinary yogas, you climb to a peak and then you want to stay there till you vanish. He says, but Sri Aurobindo to pura Himalaya darshan karate hain. But Sri Aurobindo takes you the complete Himalaya darshan. And then he would explain, Himalaya darshan complete means somewhere you will encounter beautiful scenes, somewhere you will encounter leopards, hiding places. Himalaya is Himalaya. Somewhere treacherous winds and avalanche. And somewhere it's such a beautiful climb that you are simply singing Shivoham, Shivoham. It's a complete totality of the creation. Divine is everywhere in everything. So that's how one discovers. She says, how will such a state come to an end? Whether it is inertia or true patience, I do not know, but without haste or desire, I lie at thy feet and wait. This is the ultimate surrender. No haste, no impatience. It's completely she surrendered. There are beautiful passages like that where Sri Aurobindo describes the helplessness of a child. When you are in that state, when you know that no mental effort can do what you wish should be there, and then you abandon yourself completely. Ma, you do it for me. That's the time that the grace intervenes and the change takes place. So we'll read the next prayer also simultaneously. Namaste.